Greetings fellow Mist Wanderers, my name is Steve Morgan and this is DM of the Mists, covering all things Curse of Strahd and Ravenloft. I put this video on hold for a while because I was a bit unwell and was doing shorter videos in the meantime, so apologies if you've been waiting for this one. Hopefully the wait is worth it. This follows my parts 1 and 2 of the official Fated Allies in Curse of Strahd, which I split into 2 videos. Part 1 was A to I, at Arabelle to Ismark. Part 2 was K to Z, Casimir to Zalika. Covered all the Fated Allies, or Strahd's enemies, as more officially known, listed in Curse of Strahd in the tarokka section. I've got 10 for you today, 10 alternatives. There are 5 of each. 5 of them are Curse of Strahd. I'm going to do those first, so there are other NPCs that already appear in Curse of Strahd. But to warn you, you probably will have to hone through and tweak a few things in the module in order to make it fit, but hopefully not too much. And 5 you can add to Curse of Strahd who are from the wider Ravenloft setting. Some of them actually have history or were in Barovia, so I think some of them could be some good options. And I think there's some in both columns. There's some that I think are really obvious expected choices and some that are kind of unusual and different and wildcard. For each one, I'll give a bit of lore, sources of info, stat block suggestion, and maybe a few other things. And as an added bonus, I will also suggest what kind of tarokka card suits them best from the high deck, as if you were drawing Madam Eva, drawing the card for them. And I'll even give a Madam Eva-style clue. I'll put on my best Madam Eva voice, and I've written a clue for everyone. Okay, let's start with the 5 from Curse of Strahd, starting with Izek. That's how I pronounce it. I've seen some people pronounce it Izek, so I don't know which is right. He's a popular choice as an ally. If not the Fated Ally, he can sort of join the group because of his link to Irina. I've read some anecdotal stories of groups that have recruited Izek, and even my group, when I was a player of Curse of Strahd before DMing it, at one point we were told that the abbot in Krezk had taken Irina, or actually more accurately, Irina, a bit frustrated that she'd been left alone in the church in Vallaki, travelled on her own to Krezk. When Izek found out, he said he was going to come with us, which is pretty cool. So who's fighting alongside us? Which, you know, wasn't something I ever expected. For Izek to work, you probably need to rework some stuff from the rules as written Vanilla Curse of Strahd. Probably drop the whole thing about how he covets her in an unwholesome way. I know that kind of freaks out quite a few DMs and players. I think some people suggest taking that out entirely anyway. I think if you were going to have him as an ally, you probably should definitely consider taking that out. Recruiting him, maybe when your PCs realise the Irina link, maybe the dolls give a clue. Plus, they'd probably have to get him to leave or betray the Baron, which is no easy task. But I suppose he was always loyal to the Baron, but then if he sees Irina and realises that's his long-lost sister, then he's probably going to show loyalty, more loyalty to her than to him, perhaps. Stat block, he's got a unique stat block. It's a pretty simple one, but it's a pretty cool one. I love that he's a pretty powerful dude, and he's got some cool attacks. Information for him, so he's got his own little appendix section. Chapter 5, Vallaki, obviously, mostly in the Burgomaster's mansion, but also in the Wakta house, Blinsky's toy shop because of the dolls, the town square because of the stocks, and he gets some mentions in like the special event sections. Party fit, a weak party lacking a tank. The tarokka card, Executioner makes the most sense to me, but perhaps Broken one as well. And the clue, in my best Madam Eva voice, I see a man who seeks his long-lost sister. He is strong, but loyal to another. Next up is not an individual, a dedicated individual, but someone you can choose out of a group of people, and that is someone else who is Vistani, such as, and I think the one that probably works the best, is Alexi, who's the Vistana being whipped by Luvash in the Vallaki Vistani camp, because I believe he's the one who was looking after Arabelle and then lost sight of her, and obviously she's taken by Bluto and later discovered at the lake. I suggest another Vistana because you've got at least two suggestions in the main official list. You've got Aragorn, but he's really strong, plus he's evil. And you've got Arabelle, who's weak unless you tweak or homebrew her a bit. So a random Vistana could be a good in-between, and a lot of them have stats either Bandit or Bandit Captain, which are, Bandit's not overly strong, but it's probably still stronger than a lot of the official ones that are just like commoner. But also don't forget they also have the Vistani traits, if you wish to give them Vistani traits, such as Curse and Evil Eye, which means they can cast a few spells and put abilities on enemies, such as one really cool one is, say, damage vulnerability. There's info throughout the book for the Vistani, mostly in chapter 2. There's a whole dedicated section all about the Vistani. in Serpool Encampment, also in Chapter 2, Valaki Vistani Camp, Chapter 5. Plus there's more information for them in Van Richten's Guide as well. Party fit? I don't know, it's a tough one. Card, I think seer, perhaps. Not obviously because the Vistana in question is a seer, but because of the Vistani having seers amongst their ranks, if you will. I just think it kind of makes the most sense. As for Madam Eva's clue, I'd start with maybe she says, one of my kind, and then adapt it from there, depending on who you choose, where they are. So if you were to choose Alexi, it would be, one of my kind. Find the young man chastised for failing his task to protect another. Next up, we have Muriel. She is the were-raven found in Berez, keeping tabs on Babala Saga. I'm going to show some art by Caleb's drawing. I don't think there's any official art for Muriel in Curse of Strahd, so I'm going to use this by Caleb's drawing. Thank you, Caleb, for your amazing art. I'll include a link to his Patreon in the description if you're not familiar with him. He's done a lot of Curse of Strahd NPCs. Some mod guides flesh out Muriel more, and I have read anecdotes on various forums where people's parties like Muriel and they kind of bond with Muriel and get on really well with Muriel. So I think Muriel's a cool choice, and maybe one that hopefully if you were watching this will think, oh, that kind of makes sense. Maybe in order to recruit her, they have to defeat Baba, and maybe she helps them. I know it says rules as written that she won't confront Baba, but maybe the tarokka changes things and she thinks, maybe I should confront her. Maybe instead of actually fighting directly, she acts as bait or something like that to like lure Babala Saga out or away, and then they can attack her from there. She's a were-raven, so use that stat block as a cool stat block. Information for her can be found in Chapter 10, that's Berez in U6. Party fit, if they need a tank or meat shield, she's, well, at least in 2014 rules, she is immune to, or either immune to all non-magical damage that isn't silvered, or has regeneration depending on which were-raven stat block you use. So similar to Davian, basically. I think with Davian I said if you have you could potentially be a bit of a damage absorber. Card, Raven. What else could it be? And the clue, which I've adapted from Davian's, find the feathered one who waits among the stone circle in the swamp. Next up we have Emil. Emil is the werewolf trapped in Castle Ravenloft's dungeons and is the husband to Zulika, who is the rules as written werewolf ally, and she's found in the werewolf den. He has potential to change the werewolf den narrative and potentially make it more interesting, because if they find and rescue Emil before doing the werewolf den, that could change things with Zulika and Kirill. Or if they go to the werewolf den first and mention the card reading to Zulika, it suggests that he's alive, and I think that would be quite cool. In my game, they did meet Zulika and she thought he was dead. Then they met Emil, they didn't connect the dots, and then unfortunately he got killed in Castle Ravenloft. And if she'd have known that he was alive, maybe that would have made things different. Stat block, werewolf. Information for him is mostly in Chapter 4, that's Castle Ravenloft. K75A, that's the cell he's in the dungeons. But also in Chapter 15, the werewolf den. Party fit, as well as what I said about Muriel, you know, damage absorber, meat shield. I'd say a party that likes a challenge, because they got springing from Castle Ravenloft's dungeons, and I know that some parties are nervous about going into Castle Ravenloft ahead of the end game, with the exception of maybe the dinner. Card, Beast makes a lot of sense, that was the same as Zulika's, or I guess in this case Donjon, because he's in a prison. And the clue, and I've adapted this from Zulika's, a werewolf holds a hatred for your enemy. Free him from the castle's dungeons and use his hatred to your advantage. And the last one from the Curse of Strahd list, and this is my wildcard choice, this is Helwa. She is the leader of the small group of mountain folk hiding out in the Amber Temple. In one of the rooms in the Amber Temple, there's a gladiator and a few berserkers and a direwolf, I believe. Complication of recruiting her is, do they get the berserkers as allies too? Probably, hopefully not. That would be a headache to have to manage. Maybe they turn on her when they realise that she's going to join the PCs or something like that. So they have a mini battle and she's got to fight her own kind, which is pretty grim, pretty in keeping with a horror campaign, I guess. Maybe the quest to recruit her is to defeat Sangzor. That's the giant goat on Selenka Pass, Chapter 9. She's got the stats of a gladiator, and her information is Chapter 13, Amber Temple, X15, that's the room she's found in. Party fit, lacking a tank, meat shield again. Card, it's a tough one, but I'd probably say Executioner. And the clue, I see one who leads a clan of mountain folk. She and her fellow warriors find respite from the icy cold mountain tops inside an old temple. Could be a good way to lure them to the Amber Temple if you've got no other means to do so. Okay, on to the second half. These are 5 you could add to Curse of Strahd. They're not officially in Curse of Strahd, but a bunch of them have ties and links to Barovia. I want to say at least 4 of them. Let me check. 4 of them were in... This is referring to old novels now. Old novels that have Strahd in them. I believe there were... Obviously, there's 2 Strahd novels, plus there were probably 2 more where Barovia's featured and he's in them. So I think 4 out of 5 of them have ties to Curse of Strahd and Barovia, and therefore I think could work well. The first one is Jander Sunstar. I'm a huge fan of Jander Sunstar. I even did a dedicated video to him. If memory serves, it was my first ever NPC video when I had a whole video dedicated to a Curse of Strahd or Ravenloft NPC. He is a good vampire. It's not as simple as that, but he's certainly a less evil vampire than most, who goes around hunting vampires and monsters in general. He's the protagonist of Vampire of the Mists, which my channel takes its name from, DM of the Mists, Vampire of the Mists. He visits Barovia centuries earlier, before the present day, the Barovian calendar, if you're using that and care about that. And he's sort of, in the novel, mentors Strahd in vampirism. So he meets Strahd when I think Strahd had only been a vampire for about 100 years and kind of helps him to understand vampirism a bit more, which is interesting. And a complication of him as the ally, despite being an awesome ally, is if your party then get the holy symbol of Ravenkind or the Sun Sword, they're going to be reluctant to sort of use those around him, because in addition to hurting Strahd and some of Strahd's minions, they're also hurting their fated ally. In Van Richten's guide, it suggests the vampire stat block for him, but I think that's probably a bit too powerful and obviously too similar to Strahd, so I'd probably suggest a free world vampire spawn. Maybe consider giving him more, like maxing out his HP or giving him higher than the average standard HP to sort of signify that he's a stronger, older vampire / spawn. But anyway, he was turned by somebody and was a spawn of somebody, his vampire. I think it was Cassia off the top of my head. I haven't got it in my notes. And then he defeated Cassia, and then he was technically a vampire spawn rather than a full-blooded, no pun intended, vampire. Info for him, as I mentioned, Vampire of the Mists, and in the Mist Wanderer section of Van Richten's guide, and the video I did. Watch the video I did. Please watch the video I did. Party fit is a tough one, I suppose, if you've got people who know Jander Sunstar and like their old lore, or people who you think would like him. I roleplayed him very similar to a.k.a. from Castlevania, which I don't know if that's a good or bad thing, but that's the way I did it. So if you have Castlevania fans who like a.k.a., I know my players, they met Jander after Curse of Strahd. My players really like him. But because he's a vampire spawn and he's got regeneration, a weak party lacking a tank, meat shield once again could work well. The card has to be Mists. Come on now, nod to the novel. And the clue, could it be the return of the Morning Lord? No, another vampire, but one who once fought your enemy long ago. Next up we have Firan Zal'honan, another one I've done a dedicated video on. I'm going to address the pronunciation first of all. I thought it was Firan, because it looks like it's Firan. Apparently, officially it might be Firon, but I don't know, I don't like Firon. It doesn't look like it's written to be Firon. So I use Firan, but it might not be right. And I mentioned this in the Firan video. My player said he looked like a goth Matt Mercer, and as soon as they said that, I was like, yeah, I can't unsee that. A good idea could be to replace him as the Mad Mage. I know some DMs who do this if they don't want it to be, spoiler alert now, although if you're this far into the video, you're probably not concerned about Curse of Strahd, Ravenloft videos, and if you're a player of Curse of Strahd, you shouldn't be watching anyway. But the real identity of the Mad Mage is Mordenkainen. Some people don't think that fits very well, so they change it to Firan, and that fits better. Alternatively, he could already be exploring the Amber Temple, because in the lore for him, he's interested in Amber vestiges. And, he explores the Maze of Dread looking for like the occasional one, and then comes across the temple full of them as like a big evil buffet. Stats suggested for him in Van Richten's guide are Archmage. That is actually the same as what's suggested for the Mad Mage. But I changed him, and I talk about this in the video, I changed him to have a couple of items, and he has the same spell list as a Lich, I think with maybe a couple removed, the ones that don't make sense, and to make it so it's the same number of spells as in Archmage would have, and he's unable to change his spells or learn new spells as well. Similar to the Mad Mage, because he's quite powerful, maybe he only joins in the final battle rather than travelling around the whole of Barovia with him. Oh, and he also has an imp familiar called Skiva, who often poses as a raven. Info for him is mentioned in the Mist Wanderer section in Van Richten's guide, and I've done a video, please watch the video. Party fits, similar to I think when I talked about the Mad Mage in the other video, a weak and magicless party. Card Dark Lord makes a lot of sense because for things I don't want to say because there's spoilers and you should watch it in the other video. But admittedly, Dark Lord, if you draw Dark Lord rules as written, that's the one that says you haven't got an ally, but potentially have this as your fallback if you want them to have an ally and you're doing it random and you accidentally draw the Dark Lord card. Other options could be Artifact or Raven, I guess, because of the Skiva connection. As for the clue, if you're replacing for the Mad Mage, you could potentially just use the Mad Mage one. Or a wizard, one who knows the nature of this land and even what's beyond rather well. Is there more to this man, perhaps? Next up, Erasmus van Richten. This is one I haven't done a dedicated video for, but I did mention in my dedicated Rudolf van Richten video. He's the teenage son of Dr. Rudolf van Richten, who is now a ghost. In the story for him, not just in Van Richten's guide, but I think it says this in Curse of Strahd, in the journal excerpt for Van Richten, it says that he was killed and turned by a vampire named Baron Metis, who's the first vampire that Van Richten later killed, and is the catalyst for his monster hunting journey. Van Richten cannot perceive him, I quote from Van Richten's guide, so that could be an interesting dynamic where Erasmus is maybe following or haunting Van Richten / Victavio, and Van Richten just can't perceive him at all. Van Richten's guide says, and I missed this detail initially when I added him to my game, that he only appears for a few minutes every day. Whoops, I kind of had him there all the time. Maybe the tarokka changes that, like it says in for Klutz, who's the ally, who's in the similar-ish sort of ally, an undead sort of ghost type person. It says if he's recruited as his ally, he's actually around for permanently until Strahd's defeated, rather than I think it's 7 days. Similar sort of thing. Maybe if he's the ally, he's around more permanently or longer than a few minutes every day. Maybe it's a few hours every day. Where could you put him? Is he already haunting the Blue Water Inn with Rictavio? Or maybe he's at Van Richten's tower waiting for him, or somewhere else. Van Richten's guide suggested this ghost stat block for him, but I made him a poltergeist instead. And the cool thing about poltergeists are they are invisible. So that helps the whole Van Richten can't perceive him thing. And then I introduced him in Valachan in my game after Curse of Strahd, and they just every now and again they were fighting these monsters, and I describe how like these monsters were being hit with force damage, and they were like, what? And then my wizard cast see invisibility and just saw this teenage boy floating there, and the teenage boy like freaked out when he got spotted. So I thought that was a cool way to kind of introduce him. Info, Miss Wanderer's section of Van Richten's guide. Party fit, I really don't know. The tarokka card, it's got to be ghost. And the clue could be, I see an apparition with unfinished business. Poor boy, all he wants to do is aid his father. Okay, time for my wildcard choice. And similar to Aragorn, an evil choice, the Dwarven Werebadger from two of the Lord Sloth Ravenloft novels, and hopefully I pronounced this correctly, Azrael Dak. He's an evil, brutal dude. He's described as being a killer and a murderer, and takes pleasure in it too. Potential need for timeline adjusting if that bothers you and you care about protecting timeline and the canon, because he and Lord Soth visited Barovia previously, years, maybe centuries earlier. But I think, maybe he's immortal anyway. I think it's described that somewhere that he's given a boon by Lord Soth. Maybe that boon grants immortality, or maybe it's just the classic sort of mists, domains of dread, timey-wimey changing stuff. Time goes funny anyway, and he's still around. For his stats, I guess I would adapt like the Wereboar or Werebear stat block, but he's a Werebadger. So change him that you can change into a badge, or maybe a giant badger, maybe flavour it's a dire badger, so even bigger again. Maybe use the direwolf stats instead of, say, the giant badger stats, which I think hits harder. Plus maybe give them dwarven traits, like I think they have a higher constitution and resistance against poison, off the top of my memory. I should have really made that in my notes, sorry. In one of the sources of information for him, he has a magical berserker axe, and I think he wears a chain shirt as well, so I'd kind of add those to a stat block. Plus, a boon granted to him by Lord Soth means he can cast Animate Dead once per day, which is pretty cool, so you could have a little small army of zombies as well, or skeletons. Info for him can be found in Knight of the Black Rose and Spectre of the Black Rose. Those are the two novels where he appears. And Gazetteer 4, I think this is 3rd edition additional information, and which also has additional art for him as well. Party fit, question mark. Card, beast, because he's a werebadger, that's similar to Stilika and Emil being werewolves. Maybe horseman, which is similar to Aragorn. And the clue, inspired by Aragorn's, I see a dwarf from another land who serves an old rival of your enemy. But beware, he is a cruel man with a bestial nature. And last but no means least, Sasha, whose real name is Alexi Petrovich, not to be confused with Sasha in the catacombs of Castle Ravenloft. Sasha is one of the main characters in Vampire of the Mists and fights Strahd alongside Jander Sunstar, who I mentioned earlier, using the holy symbol of Ravenkind. He's a native to Barovia. I think he grew up in the village of Barovia, but one of his parents is a Vistana. I think if memory serves, his dad was a Vistana and his mum was the daughter of the burgomaster at the time. Because he's been dead for a long time, a similar process to Nikolai Wachter, so he needs to be resurrected. Questions remain, where would his remains be? Not in Curse of Strahd, but in Vampire of the Mists, apparently there's a stone circle just outside the village of Barovia in the woods. Perhaps you add that to your game and he's there. Or maybe swap Tasha Petrovich. She is in Crypt 11 in Chapter 4, Castle Ravenloft, K84. Swap Tasha for Sasha. I wonder if Tasha, because it's Tasha Petrovna and he's Sasha Petrovich, I wonder if it's a nod to Sasha anyway. Some may argue, why would an enemy of Strahd, someone who wants to fort Strahd, have a crypt? But St. Markovia had one, so, you know, and that opens up the idea of St. Markovia being an ally, actually thinking about it, and maybe I should have added that as an additional one in this list, but never mind. In my game, because of his surname, I think it's obviously suggested he's the ancestor of the current day Petroviches. That's Father Lucian Petrovich, the priest in Vallaki, Baroness Lydia Petrovna, who is the Baron's wife, and by extension, Victor Valakovich in Vallaki would be an ancestor of Sasha. And in fact, my players, he wasn't the fated ally in my game, but they kind of adopted Victor for post-Curse of Strahd adventures. And when he found out through Jander that Sasha, his ancestor, fought Strahd, he was pretty pleased and happy about that. Stat block, I guess priest, maybe give him the max HP instead of the average or standard. There is a war priest stat block, but I think that might be too overpowered. Information for him is in Vampire of the Mists, as mentioned. Party fit, lacking a healer, or wouldn't mind all that hassle of trying to recruit him. I know some parties, you gotta jump through a lot of hoops to get Nikolai, and it's similar with this. Cards, innocent or artifact tying to the holy symbol of Ravenkind. And the clue, and this is kind of adapted from Nikolai's, I see a dead man who in life was of a priestly calling. Return life to the dead man's remains and he will be a useful ally. One who has fought your enemy before. And I like that because it kind of raises questions of like, we fought him before, did he lose, what happened? Can he give information about Strahd? Can he give information about Castle Ravenloft? But obviously it won't be present day. I think you'll have a lot of fun with that. I'm going to end this video with a list of people who I don't think work as allies. If you're thinking of homebrewing, changing, having an alternative fated ally that I didn't include in this list, these are all people within Curse of Strahd. Some people may disagree with me, some people may not like me saying, oh, this doesn't work as an ally, but I'll give my opinion and I'll explain why. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it's your call. I wouldn't have the consorts or Doru or any vampire spawn be a fated ally because ultimately Strahd has control over them. It says in the vampire spawns stat blocks that Strahd has full control over them. You hear stories of some people who have Doru team up with the allies, or maybe one of the consorts betray Strahd. I don't think that's possible. Like, unless you homebrew it to an extent, or maybe say that you know, Strahd doesn't have control of vampire spawn. I don't know. Or maybe Strahd turned them into a full vampire and then they have their own will. Maybe. I don't know. Leo de Lisnia, who I talk about in a couple of videos, I forget what the first one was, but the second one was the one recently where I talk about adding more combat to Vallaki. I say in that use the Nosferatu stat block, but as per the events of Strahd, he was turned into a vampire spawn and entombed, so he is still a spawn under Strahd's control. Rahadin, it says in the book, is 100% loyal to Strahd. I've seen a couple of people suggest on like Curse Strahd subreddit, oh, maybe Rahadin could be the fated ally. And, you know, most people say, well, I think he's the last person to ever betray and turn on Strahd. He is undoubtedly loyal to him. And the same would go to Lady Wachter as well. Even though Nikolai Wachter is an option, I think Lady Wachter wouldn't ever turn on him either. Argon Vostholt, I wouldn't push or encourage it. If it comes up organically in your game, they get the Resurrection Dark Gift from the Amber Temple and then think, hey, we can use this on the Old Dragon. That is cool. But it's a cool idea, but I think it would be too powerful. Plus, obviously, it's hard to get. But if they do that of their own thinking, without, you know, you having it as a fated ally and doing a clue and kind of indicating them as a possibility, I think they deserve that. And one that I think would be really cool, because she's got her own stat block, and it's a great stat block, is Madam Eva. Imagine if she just like throws the cards on the ground and says, I will be your ally. I don't think it would work story-wise. I think she's too powerful, but I just think it's really cool. But I don't think it'd work. And that's it for this one. What did you think of the list? Would you agree? Did you include any of these as fated allies, whether the ones from Curse of Strahd or the ones from wider Ravenloft lore? I know some people who change it to Jander without question, so I'm interested to know from DMs who did have Jander in their games and have him as the fated ally. Please tell me your stories. And did I miss anyone? Is there someone who you think whether Curse of Strahd, wider Ravenloft should have been in this list? Please let me know in the comments. Upcoming videos, I'm not actually sure what I've got coming up at the moment, so I think Factions of Ravenloft is going to be my next Ravenloft video, but I'm going to have to double check my list and see what I've got coming up. So if you want to see more videos like this in the future, please subscribe, and of course there's the playlist. I've got a Curse of Strahd playlist and a Ravenloft playlist that have 30 plus videos in each at this point. I've lost track, lost count, where you can dive through and have a look at my old videos. And we'll leave it there for this one. Thank you, Mist Wanderers.